Biden's plan to cancel up to $20,000 in federal student debt for tens of millions, including $16 million who already been approved. The Supreme Court also today ruled in favor of a Colorado website designer, saying that she could refuse work for same-sex weddings. Today's address by the president comes just 24 hours after the court's landmark decision, also along ideological lines, against affirmative action in college admissions. Let's go straight to our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, a replay of yesterday, presuming they're inside really refining a response to this. I would assume the White House had anticipated this potential outcome.
They had certainly been preparing for a plan B. And what we understand from talking to a number of White House officials is the president will not give up on his campaign promise to provide student debt relief. What the court said was that his justification under the HEROES Act and citing COVID times and the emergency there was not a legal justification. And so look for the White House to try to announce a new pathway, a new legal justification to try to have some kind of relief for student borrowers. So this is a plan B for the president.
And here's the president.
There you go, Mr. Secretary. Let me begin by saying I know there are millions of Americans in this country who feel disappointed and discouraged or even a little bit angry about the court's decision today on student debt. And I must admit I do too. Before I tell you the steps we're going to take and want to talk about what we've been able to achieve so far on student loan over the past few years. First, we made the largest increase in Pell Grants in over a decade, helping students from families who nearly all make less than $60,000 a year. Then we fixed the so-called, with the help of the department, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So the borrowers who got into public service, such as school teachers, police officers, social workers, service members, they actually got the debt relief they were entitled to under the law. Before I came to office, only 7,000 people had benefited from that program. Today, over 600,000 borrowers have received relief from that program. And it's still available. So many more people can be helped. And I encourage you to apply if you haven't already. You're still eligible. Go to studentaid.gov. It matters. Third, my administration improved the program from the Obama-Biden administration on income-driven repayment plan. That's what it was referred to as. Back then, we set a limit. Student borrowers would pay no more than 10% of their disposable income to pay back their debt at any one time. My administration is going to reduce that to 5%. It's now the most generous repayment program ever. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether from a community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their disposable income to repay their loan. And that's income after you pay for the necessities like housing and food and the like. Typical borrower is going to save about $1,000 a year. And if you keep up payments for 20 years without missing them, your total debt is forgiven after 20 years. That's what the program was before, but we've just reduced it to 5%. In addition to that, last year I announced my student debt relief plan, a plan that was on the verge of providing more than 40 million Americans with real debt relief, up to $10,000 for many borrowers and up to $20,000 for those who had gotten a Pell Grant. Nearly 90% of the relief would have gone to borrowers, 90% of it, making less than $75,000 a year. And no one making over $125,000 would qualify. This program was all set to begin. The website had been set up, the applications had been simplified so that it took less than 5 minutes to complete. Notice had been sent out to people about the relief they were eligible for. 16 million people had already been approved. The money was literally about to go out the door. And then Republican elected officials and special interests stepped in. They said, no, literally snatching from the hands of millions of Americans thousands of dollars in student debt relief that was about to change their lives. You know, these Republican officials just couldn't bear the thought of providing relief for working class, middle class Americans. Republican state officials sued my administration, attempting to block relief, including millions of their own constituents. Republicans in Congress voted to overturn the plan. I think every one. I don't think I had any Republican votes for this plan. At the same time, think about this. We all supported the Paycheck Protection Program. Remember PPP? You know, which was designed to help business owners who lost money because of the pandemic. It was a worthy program. But let's be clear. Some of the same elected Republicans, members of Congress who strongly opposed giving relief to students, got hundreds of thousands of dollars themselves in relief, members of Congress, because of the businesses they were able to keep open. Several members of Congress got over $1 million. All those loans were forgiven. You know how much that program cost? $760 billion. My program's too expensive. $360 billion more than I proposed in my student debt relief program. I was trying to provide students with $10,000 to $20,000 in relief. By comparison, the average amount forgiven in the PPP, the pandemic loan program, average amount forgiven was $70,000. Now a kid making $60,000, trying to pay back his bills, asking for $10,000 in relief. Come on, the hypocrisy is stunning. You can't help a family making 75 grand a year, but you can help a millionaire and you have your debt forgiven. My plan would not only have been life-changing for millions of Americans, it would have been good for the American economy. Freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt. More homes would have been bought, more businesses would have been started, more couples would have had the confidence to start a family. Millions of people would have felt they could get on with their lives. These Republicans blocked all that. Now, in addition to the hypocrisy, some of these Republican Congress are shamelessly pushing to advance a bill in the coming weeks that gives hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and handouts to the wealthiest Americans. They still haven't given up on making permanent a $2 trillion tax cut that they never paid for. Never paid for. $2 trillion. So let me be clear. For Republicans in Congress, it's not about reducing the deficit. It's not about fairness in forgiving loans. It's only about forgiving loans they have to pay. Today, the Supreme Court sided with them. I believe the court's decision to strike down my student debt relief program was a mistake, was wrong. I'm not going to stop fighting to deliver borrowers what they need, particularly those at the bottom end of the economic scale. So we need to find a new way, and we're moving as fast as we can. First, I'm announcing today a new path consistent with today's ruling to provide student debt relief to as many borrowers as possible, as quickly as possible. We will ground this new approach in a different law than my original plan, the so-called Higher Education Act. That will allow Secretary Cardona, who's with me today, to compromise, waive, or release loans under certain circumstances. This new path is legally sound. It's going to take longer, but in my view, it's the best path that remains to providing for as many borrowers as possible with debt relief. I've directed my team to move as quickly as possible under the law. Just moments ago, Secretary Cardona took the first step to initiate that new approach. We're not going to waste any time on this. We're getting moving on it. It's going to take longer, but we're getting at it right away. Second, we know what many borrowers will need to make their hard choices, which their budgets are being strained now when they start to repay their monthly loan payments this fall. You know, we know that figuring out how to pay these added expenses can take time for borrowers, and they might miss payments at the front end as they get back into repayment. Normally, this could lead borrowers to fall into delinquency and default. But without their it will hurt their financial security, and that's not good for them or the economy. That's why we're creating a temporary 12-month, what we're calling on-ramp repayment program. Now, this is not the same as a student loan pause. It's been in effect for the past 3 years. Monthly payments will be due. Bills will not go out, and interest will be accruing. And during this period, if you can pay your monthly bills, you should. But if you cannot, if you miss payments, this on-ramp will temporarily remove the threat of default or having your credit harmed, which can hurt borrowers for years to come. Because the Department of Education won't refer borrowers. And the reason why that will work, they won't refer borrowers who miss payments to credit agencies for 12 months to give them a chance to get back up and running. Let me close with this. Our Republican officials say student loan relief is a giveaway to the privileged. You hear that loud now, the privileged. I love their concern for the privileged. But I know who student loan borrowers are in this country. So do all you. The couple putting off having a child until they can find their way to deal with their debt. That's who they are. They're young putting off buying their first home so they can get out from under student loans. Hope on the horizon, thanks to relief that I planned last year. Today's court decision snatches it away from them. I get it. I get it. I hear this. And I'm concerned about it. But today's decision has closed one path. Now we're going to pursue another. I'm never going to stop fighting for you. We'll use every tool at our disposal to get you the student debt relief you need and reach your dreams. It's good for the economy. It's good for the country. It's going to be good for you. Thank you very, very much for listening. We're going to get this done, God willing. Thank you.
Mr. President, why did you give millions of borrowers false hope? You've doubted your own authority here in the past.
I didn't give any false hope. The question was whether or not I would do even more than was requested. What I did, I thought was appropriate and was able to be done and would get done. I didn't give borrowers false hope, but the Republicans snatched away the hope that they were given, and it's real hope. Thank you.
Mr. President, will you cancel student debt?
Your authority. Did you overstep your authority?
I think the court misinterpreted the Constitution.
Mr. President, do you admit failure in Afghanistan? Mistakes. There was a report on Afghanistan withdrawal saying there was failure, mistakes. Do you admit there was mistakes during the withdrawal and before?
No, all the evidence is coming back there. Remember what I said about Afghanistan? I said Al Qaeda would not be there. I said it wouldn't be there. I said we'd get help from the Taliban. What's happening now? What's going on? Read your press. I was right. Thanks.
So the report is from the State Department, actually, about the withdrawal.
And President Biden calling the Supreme Court's decision today, saying he overreached in trying to cancel student loan debt for millions of borrowers. The president down, but getting back up again, vowing that he will come at it with a new path that he says will take longer, but that is legally sound, and offered a few details about how he planned to do that. Let's go straight to our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, what else did you pick up on there?
Well, we'll have a new set of facts to try to tell our viewers and the American people about what the next steps will be, and we don't have those answers yet. The Department of Education will create a new regulation that, under the authority of the secretary, would set new terms for who would be eligible for getting some kind of loan relief. So we don't yet know how many Americans that will affect or what borrowing levels would be included in this. What the president was able to speak about very specifically today is that cap on how much someone would be spending of their surplus income after they pay for the basics of life, like rent and food, in order to reduce the burden right away. So that's a tangible benefit that he says he has the authority to do, so that no more than 5% of discretionary income would go toward the loan repayment. And then also, because the law will require people to begin restarting their payments after the 3 years of the COVID pause, there is that on-ramp, as he described it. So over the next 12 months, if borrowers are late, miss a payment, and so forth, they will not have some of the financial penalties that could come from that by being reported to a credit agency or having additional penalties, that kind of thing. So a bit of time to adjust to what will be a new normal of getting back to repaying those federal student loans. But the big takeaway of this is that he was thwarted at the Supreme Court under one kind of law, and the administration is trying to find a new pathway, a new justification to still provide some kind of student loan relief, which was a campaign promise, and one now that will take more time and may face additional legal challenges we don't yet know, but many more details to be developed in the days and maybe even months to come. Lester?
All right, Kelly, stand by, if you will, for me. Let me bring in NBC News political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, this was, of course, based on a campaign promise the president made, so it's politically tricky for him, but given the broad number of people who could have been affected by this loan cancellation, you could argue it's politically tricky for all.
Well, it is, and look, he had to get caught trying here, but let's remember, he tried to get this student loan forgiveness program as part of his larger, it was called Build Back Better. It ended up becoming becoming called the Inflation Reduction Act, but it wasn't included in there. And remember, that was a fully Democratic-only bill that got out of Congress, and he couldn't get some Democrats to approve of it. There were some Democrats, particularly ones that represent some red states, including Joe Manchin, who thought, hey, that was too much. Maybe there should be something in return, that if you want relief, you need to do X or something like that. So when they were thwarted in Congress, that's when he did this. But they tried to go through Congress because, as that shouted question at the end there indicated, the Biden administration, their own legal advice, thought it was questionable whether this would have been constitutional. So while there's been some debate about this current Supreme Court and how ideological they are, I don't know if this would have gotten through the pre-Trump Supreme Court, for what it's worth. It may have been, instead of 6-3, it may have been 5-4. But there were some real questions here that even Biden's own legal advisors had. But this is about politics, and this is about a demographic group, young voters, voters under 40, Lester, that the Democrats desperately need. Joe Biden desperately needs to win re-election. So I imagine they're going to continue to, quote, get caught trying all the way through November of 2020 to get some student relief here.
All right, Chuck, let me bring in our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. Laura, this goes back to the details of today's ruling by the Supreme Court. Was there room left there for other ways absent Congress?
Almost certainly. Nothing in today's decision forecloses the path that the president was describing, using a different federal law than the one that they used to try to get this program through. But it makes you wonder, well, then why not just go that path to begin with? And the answer, and you heard the president say it, is because it takes longer. And so he went through a different process, and the court today said essentially there are no shortcuts. You don't get to do it that way. You didn't have explicit congressional authorization for something this bold, something this big. You're talking about over $400 billion. You can't do that unless Congress explicitly says you can. So he's going to try to go down this different path. The question is whether he can get through it, which you have to actually give public notice and comment. That takes a while. We're talking about months, if not more, time. And it's not clear that he can get it done and get through the inevitable court challenges by 2024.
Because the question still comes back to, does he have the authority in this particular case?
Absolutely. And the same set of states that sued him, you had 6 red states and 2 borrowers that sued him this time. You can imagine they're going to be the same types of legal challenges. It might differ a little bit around the edges, but they're going to try again to stop this.
And Kelly O'Donnell, let me bring you back in here. It was clear watching the president lay all this out that this is something they thought a lot about, as if they saw this moment, this decision coming. And back to, I guess, Laura's question, why didn't they do it in the first place?
Well, the emergency powers under the HEROES Act related to the COVID crisis, that appeared to be a pathway that would move more quickly. And so they took that path first, and now they're going back to the Higher Education Act under the Department of Education. So it was in some sense a gamble, and there were so many powers under a national emergency we all lived through with COVID that the administration thought they were on solid legal ground given that national emergency. Now that that has passed, they have to find a different legal justification. Obviously, going through Congress would be the easiest way if the politics were different, but the president is trying to make good on that promise, believes in the policy, as he talked about how if people have more money in their pockets, it's good for the economy when they spend it. Of course, conservatives say it has shifted the burden if you were to have this kind of massive debt relief to those who did not attend college or also paid back their loans, and that is unfair. So this will be a political fight ongoing.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, thank you. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. And tonight on NBC Nightly News, I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching. Good day.